She told me I wasn't ambitious enough. Then I bought her dream company.
The Bellini restaurant was bustling that evening, crystal glasses clinking against the backdrop of muted conversations. I straightened my tie nervously, watching Amanda apply a final coat of her signature red lipstick. This dinner was important to her, a chance to impress Thomas Burke, her manager at Vertex Solutions. "Remember, Ian," she said, tucking her compact mirror back into her designer purse, "Thomas could fast-track my promotion to VP of Marketing. Just let me do the talking." I nodded, though something in her tone made my stomach tighten. After 3 years together, I'd grown accustomed to Amanda's ambition. I admired it, even if my own career path as operations manager at Mitchell & Co. was more measured. Thomas arrived 15 minutes late, his tailored suit and confident stride announcing his presence before he reached our table. I stood to shake his hand, but he barely glanced at me, his attention fixed entirely on Amanda. "Sorry I'm late. The Carter acquisition call ran long," he said, taking a seat directly across from Amanda. "But we closed it. Another $100 million for the company." "That's incredible," Amanda beamed. "I knew you'd make it happen." The waiter appeared with menus, but Thomas waved him away. "Bring us your best bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape. We're celebrating tonight." As the evening progressed, I became increasingly aware of my role as an afterthought. Thomas and Amanda spoke in a shorthand of industry jargon and inside jokes. When I attempted to join the conversation, mentioning a successful logistics restructuring I'd implemented at Mitchell & Co., Thomas cut me off. "That's what operations people do, right? Move things around more efficiently?" He smirked. "Not exactly revolutionary." Amanda laughed, a sound that pierced my chest. This wasn't her usual laugh. It was higher, performative, designed to please. "What about that digital marketplace concept you were telling me about last week?" Thomas asked her. "The one that could disrupt the entire industry." Amanda straightened, her eyes bright. "I've been developing it for months. The potential ROI is astronomical." My fork froze midway to my mouth. The digital marketplace had been my idea, something I'd shared with Amanda one night over dinner at our apartment. I'd planned to pitch it to my own company once I'd refined the concept. "For you have the kind of vision Vertex needs," Thomas said, his eyes lingering on her. "Unlike some people who are content to stay in their lane." I felt the air shift around us. Amanda didn't defend me. Instead, she placed her hand lightly on Thomas's arm. "That's what I keep telling Ian. He has good ideas but lacks the drive to execute them properly." The restaurant around me seemed to fade away, leaving only the sting of Amanda's words. In that moment, with expensive wine flowing and ambition thickening the air, I became invisible. "You know what separates winners from everyone else?" Thomas turned to me, finally acknowledging my presence. "Hunger. Some people have it, some don't." "Ian prefers stability," Amanda said, as if diagnosing a condition. "He's not ambitious enough to take real risks." I said nothing, the words lodging in my throat like broken glass. 3 years together. And this was how she saw me, a cautious underachiever. The remainder of the dinner passed in a blur. I paid the check despite Thomas's half-hearted protest, and we said our goodbyes in the chilled night air. The drive home was silent. When we reached our apartment, Amanda didn't meet my eyes as she said, "We need to talk." 2 hours later, she was gone, moved out to reassess her priorities, taking half of our shared belongings and all of my trust with her. 1 week later, I saw them together at a cafe near Amanda's office. 2 weeks after that, her social media announced her promotion to Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Vertex Solutions. The position hadn't even existed before. Alone in our half-empty apartment, staring at the announcement on my phone, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of her betrayal. She hadn't just left me. She'd stolen my idea, handed it to Thomas, and used it as her stepping stone. That night, I made no grand declarations of revenge. I said nothing at all, but something shifted inside me, a quiet awakening that would change everything. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. Every morning, I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there, only to remember all over again. The betrayal wasn't just personal. Amanda had taken a piece of my professional identity too. My colleagues noticed the change. "You look like hell, Foster," remarked Helen, our HR director, when I dragged myself into a Monday morning meeting. I forced a smile and mumbled something about allergies. The truth was too humiliating to share. I had been discarded, deemed insufficiently ambitious by the woman I thought would eventually become my wife. In my apartment, now eerily spacious with half the furniture gone, I started spending evenings scrolling through financial news. That's when I saw it. A press release from Vertex Solutions announcing their revolutionary new digital marketplace platform. The one spearheading the project? Thomas Burke, with Amanda Harrison listed as the strategic visionary. My throat tightened as I read the description. It was my concept, down to the revenue model and user experience framework I'd sketched on napkins during our date nights. Reading further, I discovered they'd secured $50 million in funding to develop and launch it. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, my breathing shallow. For the first time, I understood what real betrayal felt like. Seeing your own creation attributed to someone else, watching others profit from your thoughts. The next morning, instead of calling in sick like I wanted to, I went to work early. Mitchell & Co. was a respectable mid-sized firm, stable, reliable, but not exactly cutting edge. I'd chosen it for its work-life balance and ethical culture. Now I wondered if Amanda had been right. Had I settled for comfort over achievement? At my desk, I pulled out old project files reviewing initiatives I'd implemented over the years. Cost reductions, efficiency improvements, vendor relationship overhauls, all successful, all profitable for the company, all accomplished with minimal fanfare. I had never sought recognition, believing the results spoke for themselves. "Ian, got a minute?" My boss, Gerald, stood at my office door. "I need your assessment on the Westlake Distribution Center issue." Over the next hour, I walked Gerald through my analysis, including 3 potential solutions with projected outcomes. He nodded appreciatively. "This is why you're my go-to person for operations problems," he said. "You don't just identify issues, you solve them." As he left, his words hung in the air. For years I'd been solving problems, creating systems, generating value, yet somehow I'd internalized Amanda's perception that methodical work equated to lack of ambition. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, finally stopping at the window overlooking the city lights. What if Amanda was wrong about me? What if what she called lack of drive was actually a different kind of ambition, the patient, thorough kind that built lasting value rather than chasing quick wins? The digital marketplace concept had come from months of careful market analysis, not a spontaneous stroke of inspiration. The implementation strategy I'd developed, the one Amanda had presented as her own, was grounded in years of operational experience. I pulled out a notepad and began writing, not stopping until dawn broke over the horizon. By morning I had the outline of a plan, not for revenge, but for reclamation. Not just of my idea, but of my sense of self-worth. The first step was understanding exactly what Vertex was doing with my concept. I spent the next week researching their public announcements, studying their partnerships, analyzing their technical approach. They were moving fast but cutting corners, typical of Thomas's aggressive style. 3 weeks after Amanda left, I ran into her colleague Ryan at a coffee shop. He'd always been friendly, unaware of the personal connection between Amanda and me. "Ian, haven't seen you in ages," he said, joining me at my table. "How have you been?" "Managing," I replied. "How are things at Vertex?" Ryan rolled his eyes. "Chaos. Burke's pet project is consuming all our resources, and Harrison is running everyone ragged, trying to meet impossible deadlines." "The marketplace platform?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yeah, between us it's hitting some serious snags. The architecture is fundamentally flawed, something about the payment processing integration. Burke won't listen to the dev team, and Harrison—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "And Harrison?" I prompted. Ryan lowered his voice. "She's in over her head. The technical details she claimed to understand, it's obvious now she doesn't. But she's got Burke wrapped around her finger, so everyone pretends not to notice." My idea was faltering in their hands, not because it was flawed, but because they didn't truly understand the operational complexity behind it. The realization didn't bring satisfaction, only clarity. As Ryan left, He mentioned a tech conference happening the following month. Vertex is showcasing the platform prototype there. Should be interesting to see if it actually works. That night I registered for the conference, paid the exorbitant attendance fee, and made a phone call to Gerald. "I'd like to take some personal time next month," I said. "There are some things I need to figure out." "Everything all right?" Gerald asked, concern evident in his voice. "Not yet," I answered truthfully, "but it will be." The tech conference was held at the Grand Hyatt, a gleaming glass monolith in the heart of downtown. I arrived early, collecting my badge and conference materials with mechanical efficiency. My mind wasn't on the keynote speeches or networking opportunities. It was focused on the Vertex Solutions presentation, scheduled for 2:00 p.m. I chose a seat near the back of the ballroom, grateful for the anonymity of the crowd. When Thomas and Amanda took the stage, my chest tightened. Amanda looked different, sharper somehow, with a new haircut and a power suit that screamed success. Thomas stood beside her, radiating confidence as he began their presentation. "Today, we're revolutionizing the industry with our proprietary digital marketplace platform," he announced, gesturing to a sleek graphic behind him. I watched silently as they outlined my vision, presenting my carefully crafted strategy as their groundbreaking innovation. The audience seemed impressed, nodding along as Amanda described the unique approach to vendor integration that I had sketched out on our living room floor months earlier. Then came the demonstration. The prototype looked polished on the surface, but as they navigated through the interface, I noticed the flaws immediately. The payment processing system was clumsy, the vendor onboarding process unnecessarily complicated. They had prioritized flash-over functionality, exactly what I had warned against in my original concept. "Questions?" Thomas asked, concluding the presentation. An older man in the front row raised his hand. "What about the transaction fee structure? How will you balance competitive rates with profitability?" Thomas hesitated, his smile faltering slightly. Amanda stepped in smoothly. "We're implementing a dynamic fee structure that adjusts based on transaction volume," she said confidently. It was gibberish, a non-answer wrapped in corporate jargon. The man seemed unimpressed, but the moment passed, and the audience applauded politely as Thomas and Amanda left the stage. I slipped out before they could spot me, processing what I'd just witnessed. Their implementation was fundamentally flawed, but they had secured massive funding and industry attention. The idea itself was still brilliant. They just weren't executing it properly. Instead of dejection, I felt an unexpected calm. For the first time, I saw the situation with perfect clarity. Amanda hadn't stolen my success. She'd stolen an opportunity she couldn't fully utilize. That evening, I didn't return to my hotel room. Instead, I found a quiet cafe with strong Wi-Fi and began to work. I opened a fresh document and typed a title, Digital Marketplace 2.0, Enhanced Architecture and Implementation Strategy. Hours passed as I refined and expanded my original concept, addressing the weaknesses in Vertex's approach. I incorporated insights from the audience questions and added innovations I'd been contemplating since the initial idea. By midnight, I had the framework for something far superior to what Thomas and Amanda had presented. The next morning, I called Gerald. "I'd like to request a meeting with the executive team when I return," I said without preamble. Gerald sounded surprised. "What's this about, Ian?" "I have a proposal that could transform our company. I need 30 minutes of their time." There was a pause. "This doesn't sound like you," he finally said. "Perhaps you never really knew me," I replied, surprising myself with my directness. 3 days later, I stood before Mitchell & Co.'s executive team, presenting my enhanced digital marketplace concept. I didn't mention Vertex or Amanda. I didn't need to. The strength of the idea spoke for itself. "This is impressive work, Foster," said Catherine Woods, our CEO, after I finished. "But it's a significant departure from our current business model. The investment required would be substantial." "I'm aware," I replied calmly, "but the potential return far outweighs the risk. I've prepared a detailed implementation timeline and resource allocation plan." I handed out folders containing my analysis. As they flipped through the pages of meticulous research and projections, I saw respect dawning in their eyes, not just for the idea, but for me. You've clearly put enormous thought into this, Catherine said, closing her folder. But even if we greenlight the project, we'd need to partner with a tech firm for development. Our in-house capabilities aren't sufficient. I've anticipated that, I said, sliding another document across the table. These are 5 potential development partners, ranked by capabilities and cost-effectiveness. The room fell silent. Then Gerald laughed, a short, surprised sound. When did you have time to do all this? I met his gaze steadily. I've always been thorough, Gerald. The difference is, now I'm being thorough about my own vision, not someone else's. Catherine studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Let's set up a follow-up meeting for next week. I want our CTO and CFO to review these numbers more carefully. As the meeting adjourned, Gerald caught up with me in the hallway. What happened to you? He asked, his expression a mixture of confusion and admiration. I considered the question carefully. Nothing happened to me, I finally answered. I just stopped letting other people define my ambition. That night, I received an email from Catherine requesting a private meeting the following morning. The subject line read simply, Opportunity. I closed my laptop and went to the window, looking out at the city lights. Something had shifted inside me. Not a dramatic transformation, but a realignment. I wasn't becoming someone new. I was becoming more fully myself. For the first time since Amanda walked out, I felt genuinely grateful to her. In trying to diminish me, she had inadvertently set me free. Catherine's office had a view of the entire city, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing the morning skyline. She gestured for me to sit as her assistant closed the door behind us. I'll be direct, Ian, she said, folding her hands on her desk. Your presentation yesterday was exceptional, but I don't think Mitchell & Co. is the right home for it. My stomach dropped. I'd miscalculated, pushed too hard, too fast. However, she continued, studying me carefully, I believe in the concept, and more importantly, I believe in the mind behind it. She slid a business card across the desk. Lawrence Chen. He's an old friend and one of the shrewdest venture capitalists in the industry. I called him last night about your proposal. I picked up the card, confused. I don't understand. Catherine leaned back in her chair. Lawrence is assembling a team of investors for a new tech venture fund. They're looking for disruptive concepts with experienced leadership attached. And you recommended me, I asked, disbelief evident in my voice. I recommended both you and your concept. She paused, her gaze direct. Ian, you're an exceptional operations manager, but you've always been capable of much more. This idea of yours deserves proper backing, and you deserve the chance to lead it. My mind reeled with possibilities. What about my position here? That depends on you. Lawrence will want you fully committed if they decide to invest. But let's cross that bridge if we come to it. She gestured to the card. He's expecting your call. I left Catherine's office in a daze, the business card heavy in my pocket. By noon, I had a meeting scheduled with Lawrence Chen for the following day. Chen's offices occupied the top floor of a boutique financial building downtown. The space was minimalist, all clean lines and understated luxury. Lawrence himself was nothing like I expected. In his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and wearing jeans with a simple button-down, he greeted me with a firm handshake. Catherine doesn't make recommendations lightly, he said, leading me to a conference room where 3 other people waited. These are my partners. You have 30 minutes to convince us. I'd prepared all night, refining my presentation, anticipating questions. As I spoke, I felt a strange confidence take hold. Not arrogance, but certainty in the value of what I was offering. When I finished, the room was silent for several long moments. Finally, a woman at the end of the table, introduced earlier as Maya Patel, spoke up. Your technical architecture is sound, but Vertex Solutions already has significant market advantage with their platform. How do you plan to compete? I'd been waiting for this question. Their implementation has critical flaws, I explained, bringing up a slide I'd prepared. Their payment processing integration is fundamentally unsecure, and their vendor onboarding creates unnecessary friction. Most importantly, they've overlooked the regulatory compliance requirements for cross-border transactions. Lawrence raised an eyebrow. You've studied their system closely. I've studied the market closely, I corrected, maintaining eye contact. Their weaknesses create our opportunity. The meeting extended from 30 minutes to 2 hours. By the end, Lawrence's team had dissected every aspect of my proposal, challenging assumptions, probing projections. I answered each question directly, acknowledging limitations where they existed and defending my vision where it mattered. As the others filed out, Lawrence remained seated. "You're not what Catherine described," he said, his expression thoughtful. "What did she describe?" "A brilliant but cautious operations expert. You just presented like a seasoned CEO." He studied me for a moment. "Something changed for you recently. What was it?" The question caught me off guard. I considered giving a professional non-answer, but something about Lawrence's directness demanded honesty. "I was in a relationship with someone who told me I lacked ambition," I said finally. "She left me for her boss and took one of my ideas with her. That idea is now Vertex's digital marketplace." Lawrence's eyes widened slightly. "That's complicated." "It clarified things for me," I replied. "I realized I'd been defining ambition by other people's standards." He nodded slowly. "Catherine was right about you." He stood, extending his hand. "We'll be in touch within the week." 3 days later, Lawrence called. His team was prepared to invest $75 million in my concept, with me as CEO of the newly formed company. The terms were more generous than I'd dared hope for. "Why?" I asked bluntly. "Why take this risk on someone with no CEO experience?" "Because you have something more valuable," Lawrence replied. "You understand the operational backbone this concept needs to succeed. Anyone can have a vision, Ian. Few can actually implement it properly." That night, I submitted my resignation to Mitchell & Cody. Catherine accepted it with a knowing smile and an offer to become our first enterprise client. Within a month, Nexus platform was incorporated, with offices in a refurbished warehouse space downtown. Lawrence's team helped assemble a world-class development team, and I brought in key talent I'd worked with over the years, people whose quiet competence had often been overlooked. 4 months into development, I received a text from Ryan, my inadvertent informant from the coffee shop. "Vertex Marketplace launch delayed again. Internal chaos. Burke blaming tech team, but everyone knows the concept is flawed. Harrison looking desperate." I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Not out of malice, but as a reminder of what happens when ambition outpaces substance. As Nexus Platform's launch date approached, industry buzz began to build. A feature in Tech Innovator magazine described our company as the dark horse poised to redefine digital marketplaces. The article mentioned Vertex only in passing, noting their troubled platform development. I kept my focus internal, working closely with our team to ensure every aspect of the platform met our exacting standards. I wasn't building this to prove something to Amanda or Thomas. I was building it because it was a genuinely superior solution. The night before our official launch, I stood alone in our empty office looking at the team photos already decorating our walls. Faces bright with purpose and pride, a company culture built on substance rather than showmanship. My phone buzzed with a text from Lawrence. "Ready for tomorrow?" I typed back a simple response. "We've been ready all along." Our platform launch exceeded all expectations. Within 2 weeks, Nexus had acquired over 3,000 vendors, and user registrations were growing exponentially. The industry took notice, with technology blogs praising our seamless integration and intuitive design. One analyst described it as what Vertex Solutions promised but failed to deliver. I kept my head down, focusing on operations and expansion rather than publicity. Lawrence handled the press, becoming the public face of our success while I ensured the foundation remained solid. This arrangement suited me perfectly. 3 months after our launch, at Lawrence's insistence, I attended the annual Digital Innovation Summit. "You can't hide in the operations room forever," he had said. "You're the CEO. People need to see the mind behind the platform." The summit was held at the Westfield Hotel, the same venue where Amanda and I had attended a charity gala the previous year. The irony wasn't lost on me as I adjusted my tie in the elevator's mirrored wall. I looked different somehow, not just the new tailored suit or the confidence in my posture, but something in my eyes. The ballroom was crowded with industry leaders and tech innovators. Lawrence waved me over to a group where he was holding court. "There he is," Lawrence said, clapping me on the shoulder. "The architect of Nexus Platform's unprecedented growth." I shook hands with the group, recognizing several prominent venture capitalists and tech executives. Their questions were specific and technical about our security architecture, scaling strategy, and international compliance framework. I answered each one thoroughly, without embellishment. "Remarkable," said a silver-haired woman I recognized as the CEO of a major investment firm. "Most startups focus on flash over substance. Your approach is refreshingly pragmatic." "Substance is sustainable," I replied. "Flash fades." As the conversation continued, I felt a prickle of awareness, the sensation of being watched. I turned slightly and froze. Across the room, standing by the bar, were Thomas and Amanda. Thomas looked much as he had at the tech conference, though perhaps more strained around the eyes. Amanda, however, had changed. Her confident posture was gone, replaced by a tense alertness as she whispered urgently to Thomas, her gaze fixed on me. Lawrence followed my line of sight and raised an eyebrow. "Vertex Solutions," he murmured. "Their marketplace platform is hemorrhaging users to Nexus. Rumor has it they're seeking emergency funding to overhaul the entire system." "Is that so?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. Lawrence studied my face. "You never mentioned your history with them." "It wasn't relevant to building Nexus." He nodded slowly, a new respect in his eyes. "Most people would have made it their mission to destroy them. You focused on building something better instead." The group moved toward the keynote presentation, but I excused myself, needing a moment alone. I headed for the terrace, the cool evening air a welcome relief from the crowded ballroom. I wasn't surprised when I heard footsteps behind me. "Ian." I turned. Amanda stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright lights inside. She stepped forward, and I saw uncertainty in her expression, an emotion I'd rarely witnessed in her. "To your platform," she began, then faltered. "It's extraordinary. The market integration, the payment processing system, it's exactly what we've been struggling to achieve." "I know," I replied simply. She moved closer, lowering her voice. "Thomas doesn't understand why we can't replicate it. The board is losing confidence. I'm in a difficult position." I remained silent, waiting. "I've been thinking about us," she continued, her voice softening to the tone she'd once used when she wanted something from me. "About what happened. I may have been hasty in my assessment." "Of my ambition?" I asked, my voice level. She winced slightly. "I misjudged you." "No," I said, surprising myself with my calmness. "You judged me accurately by your standards, but your standards were flawed." Amanda's expression hardened. "Is that why you built Nexus? To prove me wrong?" I considered the question carefully. "I built Nexus because it was a good idea implemented properly. Your opinion of me is irrelevant to that fact." "Vertex is offering to acquire Nexus," she said abruptly. "Thomas sent me to feel out your interest. We could work together again, Ian, like we used to talk about." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, genuine sound of surprise. "Amanda, Nexus is currently valued at 4 times what Vertex is worth. If anyone is acquiring anyone, it would be the reverse." Her face paled. "That's impossible. Vertex is an established company with declining user numbers, technical debt, and a fundamentally flawed platform architecture," I finished for her. "Your emergency funding fell through last week. Your board is considering a complete platform rebuild, but you lack the capital." Her shock told me my information was accurate. Lawrence's network of industry contacts was proving invaluable. "How did you know all that?" she whispered. "I pay attention," I said simply. "I always did." Before she could respond, the terrace door opened again, and Thomas stepped out. His face tightened when he saw me. "Foster," he said curtly. "Quite the little success story, aren't you?" I didn't respond, merely nodded in acknowledgement. "Amanda, the keynote is starting," he said, his tone making it clear it wasn't a suggestion. She hesitated, looking between us. "Ian was just telling me that Nexus isn't interested in Vertex's acquisition offer." Thomas's jaw tensed. We're still a major player in the market. Your startup's initial success doesn't change that." "Of course not," I agreed politely, "though you might want to address the security vulnerability in your payment processing system. It's making your enterprise clients nervous." His expression confirmed my suspicion. They hadn't even discovered the vulnerability yet. Amanda looked at me with new eyes, finally understanding what she had overlooked all along. "Enjoy the keynote," I said, turning to go back inside. "I have a meeting with your largest client in 15 minutes. They're quite interested in switching to Nexus." As I walked away, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. 6 months after the Digital Innovation Summit, I sat in my office reviewing the final acquisition documents. Nexus platform had grown exponentially, securing major enterprise clients and expanding internationally. Our user base had surpassed all projections, and our valuation had reached levels that made the business news headlines. Vertex Solutions, meanwhile, had continued its downward spiral. After failing to secure emergency funding, they had attempted a hasty platform rebuild that only compounded their technical issues. Their stock had plummeted, and key executives had begun jumping ship. When Lawrence first suggested acquiring Vertex, I hesitated. "Is this about retribution?" he had asked, studying my expression carefully. "No," I answered honestly. "It's about rescuing a good concept from poor execution. Their client base still has value, and their industry relationships could accelerate our growth in certain sectors. The acquisition would be announced tomorrow, Nexus platform absorbing Vertex Solutions in a deal that would consolidate our position as the industry leader." I had insisted on fair terms, offering more than the market deemed Vertex worth, not out of sentimentality, but because it was the right strategic decision. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Lawrence entered, followed by Helen, my former HR director from Mitchell & Co., now our chief people officer at Nexus. "The transition team is ready," Helen said, handing me a folder. "We've reviewed all of Vertex's personnel files and identified key talent to retain." I opened the folder, scanning the assessments. "And the others. Generous severance packages, outplacement services, and extended benefits," she confirmed. "Just as you requested." Lawrence shook his head slightly. "Still think you're being too generous to a company that would have crushed you without a second thought?" "We're not them," I replied simply. "That's why we're succeeding." After they left, I stood at my office window, watching the sun set over the city. Tomorrow, I would walk into Vertex's offices as their new owner. The thought brought no vindictive pleasure, only a sense of completion, a circle closing. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Foster, Thomas Burke is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." I paused, surprised. The acquisition paperwork had been handled through lawyers and board representatives. There was no reason for Thomas to be here. "Send him in," I said after a moment. Thomas entered, looking markedly different from the confident executive I'd first met at the Bellini restaurant. His suit was still expensive, but it hung slightly loose, and the arrogance in his posture had been replaced by a rigid tension. "Foster," he said by way of greeting. "Thomas, this is unexpected." He remained standing, declining my gesture toward a chair. "I wanted to speak with you directly before tomorrow's announcement." "About?" "My position," he said bluntly. "I assume I'm being terminated." I studied him, noting the slight tremor in his hand, the shadows under his eyes. This wasn't the same man who had dismissed me so casually over dinner. "Actually, you're being reassigned," I replied. "Your client relationships are valuable, and you've shown skill in opening new markets despite the platform's technical issues." Confusion crossed his face. "You're keeping me on?" "In a revised capacity, yes. You'll report to our Director of Business Development, focusing on client acquisition rather than product strategy." He stared at me, clearly struggling to process this information. "Why would you do that?" "Because it makes good business sense," I said simply. "Your talents are real, Thomas. They were just misapplied." A strange look passed over his face, something between relief and shame. "And Amanda?" "That's not my decision," I replied carefully. "The board voted to eliminate her position yesterday. The severance package is generous." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. She left, 2 weeks ago. Said she needed a fresh start. Didn't even wait for the acquisition to finalize. I said nothing, feeling no surprise. Amanda had always moved on when situations no longer served her advancement. She was wrong about you, Thomas said suddenly. We both were. It doesn't matter anymore, I replied, and realized I meant it. Their opinion of me, once so important that it had shattered my self-worth, now seemed utterly insignificant. After Thomas left, I returned to the acquisition documents, making a few final notes for the transition team. A text from Lawrence appeared on my phone. Dinner tonight to celebrate, the whole executive team is joining. I smiled, texting back my acceptance. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Not Lawrence this time, but an unknown number. The message was brief. Congratulations on the acquisition. You deserved it. I deleted it without responding. Some chapters needed no epilogue. The next morning, I walked into Vertex's offices, Lawrence and our transition team beside me. The atmosphere was tense, employees watching warily as we moved through the open workspace toward the conference room where the announcement would be made. I noticed Ryan, my coffee shop informant, among the anxious faces. He gave me a nervous nod, which I returned with a reassuring smile. In the conference room, I addressed the assembled Vertex employees directly. No corporate platitudes, no vague promises, just honest information about the transition process, the retention criteria, and the support systems in place for those not continuing with the company. This isn't about erasing Vertex, I concluded. It's about integrating its strengths into a better whole. Many of you created significant value that was undermined by strategic missteps. We recognize that value and we want to preserve it. Later, as I toured the facility with the transition team, a young developer approached me cautiously. Mr. Foster, I just wanted to say, well, your platform architecture is brilliant. The way you solved the cross-border transaction issue, she trailed off, clearly nervous. Thank you, I said. Are you on the core development team? She nodded. Junior member. I tried to flag some of the issues with our implementation, but no one was listening. We'll be listening now, I assured her. The integration team will want your input. The relief in her expression reminded me of myself not so long ago, someone with valuable insights but without the platform to be heard. That evening I returned to my apartment, the same one Amanda had walked out of 6 months earlier. It felt different now, filled with books and notes and evidence of a life lived on my own terms. I'd considered moving to a more luxurious place after Nexus took off, but something had held me back. Perhaps I'd needed to transform this space, once filled with memories of rejection, into a symbol of my reconstruction. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat at the window, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. The acquisition was just another beginning. My phone rang, Lawrence calling to confirm our strategy meeting in the morning. As we discussed the integration timeline, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. The quiet certainty I'd been cultivating had fully bloomed into something powerful, self-knowledge. I wasn't Amanda's kind of ambitious. I never would be. My strength lay in building patiently, thoroughly, with attention to every detail, creating systems that would last rather than quick wins that would fade. And in the end, that kind of ambition had proven far more valuable.